Remember getting unhurried on purpose? This isn't just so we have more time to do the things that we love. Well, that's great. It's because followers of Jesus, if we don't get unhurried, we will be tempted to pay more attention to the troubles of the world around us than the voice of the God who is with us. When our priorities are out of whack, we will be tempted to listen more to the sound of our own voice than the voice of the one who holds us together. We cannot be busy and pray. If our lives are marked by inward chaos and feeling rushed and distracted, we cannot possibly be fully present with God. Nehemiah prayed consistently. And we should too. From my own experience, the more we seek God, the more we will see him. There are seasons for all of us when prayer feels challenging for any number of reasons, but the more consistently we reach for God through prayer, the more consistently we will see him everywhere we go. The more consistently we reach for God in prayer, the more we will want to reach for God in prayer. It's like with any good thing. The more we exercise, the easier it gets to exercise, so they say, apparently. I'm not sure I've experienced that yet, but you know what I'm saying. The more we practice an instrument, the easier it gets to play that instrument. If we're going to be a people marked by prayer, we have to be consistent. Earlier, I invited you to think about your rhythms of prayer, and I just wonder how those rhythms could grow to be marked by greater consistency. We need to be a people who pray specifically, who pray consistently, and we need to be a people who pray extraordinary prayers. Nehemiah's prayers were extraordinary. His prayers were beyond what was possible in human terms. They were beyond the normal, everyday requests. Nehemiah was praying big prayers. The essence of his prayer was extraordinary. I mean, think about it. He prayed for an entire group of people to turn back to God. He prayed that the king might give him favor so he could return to a land that had already been captured and accomplish something that was seemingly impossible, rebuilding the wall. The prayers of Nehemiah were so extraordinary that they cost him something. They weren't just requests from God to grant him $1 million in his dream car. These requests were about changing the trajectory of a people who had been exiled, protection from enemies, strength for the meaningful, God-honoring work of their hands. These prayers were extraordinary. At Canyon Ridge, our mission is that we want to spark a movement of disciple makers with too many generations to count in the city of Las Vegas and beyond. We want to see generations of disciple makers flow out of here so that 100 years from now, there would be disciples all over the U.S., all over the world, that one way or another could be traced back to Canyon Ridge, not because we want our name on it, but because we want to be a people who are faithful to both be disciples and make disciples. And we believe this is God's call on our church. It's what we've been saying this whole series. To be disciples and make disciples, we're going to have to prioritize the right things. I mean, there are movements of disciple makers that exist around the world where disciples are quickly multiplying other disciples who multiply other disciples. And I just want to say the only way that these kinds of movements of multiplying disciples break out is by prayer. It's not by human effort. It's not by the right strategies, while those things are important, but it is through the power of prayer. And so if we are going to be a people who make disciple makers, we have to pray. Specifically, consistently, and extraordinarily. It won't just be our own efforts that help us make other followers of Jesus. It will be the power of extraordinary prayer. And we together, both as individuals and as a community of Canyon Ridge, are going to need to be a people marked by prayer if we are ever going to spark a movement of disciple makers. And I know this is the way that God is stirring each of us and our church forward together. So how do we practice extraordinary prayer? Well, I read a quote this week that might sound simple, but it's one way to start. Your prayer life right now is ordinary for you. Add something to it to make it extraordinary for you. Then when that becomes ordinary, add something again to make it extraordinary and keep repeating the process. To keep taking whatever might be true of our prayer life as it is right now, even if that's nothing, and adding something to it that makes it extraordinary for us. So I've asked you a couple times, what's the current rhythm of your prayer? How do you need to add or shift that in such a way that feels extraordinary to you? We're all in different places. We're all a people in progress. It's okay, wherever we find ourselves. Maybe you feel slammed, and the best you've got right now is 5 minutes on your way out the door in the morning with your Pop-Tart in your mouth. What if you took a step this week to wake up 20 minutes earlier to offer 20 uninterrupted, extraordinary minutes to God? Or maybe a group of friends you spend time with. A step of extraordinary prayer that might feel scary is to build intentional time this week to pray specifically for one another in the pain or stress of the people in your lives. Maybe you've never prayed for those close to you but far from God. That would be extraordinary for you. You could even try this simple prayer every day this week that I promise would have like extraordinary result. Lord, show me one person to share your love with today. When I say results, not because of anything we do, but because God's like, let's do it. Show me one person. Maybe it's the frequency of your prayers that needs to take a step. Maybe it's the content, like the nature of your prayers that needs to take a step. Whatever it might be, no judgment. But let's keep becoming people and a church who are marked by prayer. As we do this, we're essentially just trying to follow the example of the early church. In the book of Acts, we see the first church beginning to form and take shape. And we see words being said in the book of Acts that look like this. Like in Acts 1, it says, they all joined together constantly in what? Prayer. In Acts 2, it says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to what? Prayer. In Acts 4, there's this miracle that happens, and it says when they heard this, they raised their voices together in what? Prayer. Over and over, we see the early church being devoted to specific, consistent, extraordinary prayer. And so my question back to each of us individually and all of us collectively together is this: in what ways are our prayers consistent, specific, and extraordinary? Is there even one of those areas that you find that, man, I need to lean in here, I need to press in here? In what ways are your prayers specific, consistent, and extraordinary? And maybe another question that might help you is, what is my next step in becoming a person of prayer? Not just people who pray, but people of prayer. Maybe you need to think about the different buckets that you can grow in your prayer life, even just the different buckets of people to pray for, starting with yourself. Zooming out one layer to the people around you, and then even to the world around you. Around here, though, we are people who practice. We hear from the scripture, and we obey it immediately by doing what it says, so we're going to have a moment of practice of extraordinary prayer. Now, everybody take a deep breath. Some of you, I said we're going to practice, and you already are glaring at me. It's okay. We're going to practice extraordinary prayer together so that we can keep taking steps in the kind of people we want to become. So we're going to do two practices. One, we're going to practice together right now for just a few minutes. And then a story is going to play, and that will invite us into one other simple practice. And then we'll sing and take communion together. All those things are still coming, so just hang tight. I just encourage you to be present in this moment. But to begin, I just want to ask, what is something in your life that feels just beyond reach that you want to bring to God? A prayer that would feel specific and extraordinary for you. Maybe it's something you yourself are facing, something in your family, something with someone you love, a health concern, a future stressor, any of those things. What's something in your life that feels specific and extraordinary, meaning it couldn't be accomplished by the work of humans, like God would have to intervene for this thing to come true? I just want you to call that to mind. And I'm going to invite you to be really brave and bold and share that extraordinary prayer with someone else. You don't need to pray a prayer. You just need to name the request, the extraordinary request, to someone around you. And then that person, all they're going to do in response is just say, I'm holding you in God's presence. We don't need to fix each other. We can't. We don't need to solve it for each other. We can't. But what we can do is hold one another in God's presence. And then you're just going to switch. The other person is going to share their specific, extraordinary request. And you're just going to say, I am holding you in God's presence. And so in just a second, we're going to try this. And I know some of you, it is not your day. It's really hard. You can't imagine doing this. I'm just going to invite you to just stay seated and don't make eye contact with anyone else. And they won't bother you, okay? But I do want to encourage us to be brave and bold and to step out of our comfort zone and look around for people who might want prayer. And so the easy way we're going to do this is we're going to stand to pray together. If you don't want prayer, just stay seating and don't look at anybody, okay? But I want to invite as many of us as possible to stand and to hold our extraordinary request before God and hold that with one another. So let's go ahead and practice this right now.